Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Superman 75th anniversary celebration, and we have a good crowd for you. I kind of want to bring them out. You guys want to meet them? I know that that crowd must be cheering and jonesing because the number one. Let's bring out our longtime DC member of the community, author of 75 years of DC Comics, The Art of Modern Myth-Making, Paul Levitz. How about from the 1950s Adventures of Superman show, the original Jimmy Olsen, Jack Larson. A proper greeting, thank you. Long time Superman writer, artist. You might remember a little story called The Death of Superman, Dan Jurgens. If you saw Superman Unbound, and if not, go get it real quick, because this is the voice of Supergirl, Molly Quinn. What was that? You want to meet everybody else, don't you? Author of some of the most beloved pieces of comic you've ever read. I love this guy dearly. I read him voraciously. Mr. Grant Morrison. If you saw Man of Steel, and I'm doubting anybody in this room didn't, the teenage Clark Kent, Mr. Dylan Sprayberry. That's the funny. Co-publisher of DC Comics. I think you probably all have a copy of something he's worked on in your back pocket. Jim Lee. The quintessential voice of Superman. You'd know the Superman the Animated Series. I know you all watch all the time and have the DVDs. Mr. Tim Daly. Yeah. Little surprise addition, guy who's responsible for just about anything that gets written these days, screenwriting-wise, for Batman, Superman, you name it, Mr. David Goyer. Okay, sorry, that's all we got. So let's try to... Oh, who do you think's here? If I need to make the introduction, the Man of Steel himself, Henry Cavill. They like you. And everyone has an iPhone. How about that? Wow. Man, look at that. Posters, you name it. Okay, sit. The kids behind you gotta watch. All right, so I'm gonna open this up because I have quite the diverse array here of Superman talent. 75 years. I won't live that long. And Superman will go on, I can't even imagine, 750 years until we run out of paper. Until the sun burns out, exactly, David. What does that mean to you people? I mean, you are obviously representatives of it, but what does it mean to you emotionally, from a personal sense? Anybody can jump in. Start at the end.
Just for me, I mean, it's about the fact that Superman has lasted this long, that we've all been able to participate in this fictional life is really quite amazing. You know, and as you say, this guy's going to outlive all of us here, and just the fact that we've all been allowed to participate and to add a little bit to the legend, I think it's a really profound and exciting thing to be able to have done.
Anybody else? Okay, Grant said it all. I like it. You know what? I goofed. I need to make one other introduction. Mr. Gary Sassman is here from Comic-Con with a very special presentation. Responsible for programming on the here at Comic-Con for years and years. You should applaud.
Thanks, Gary. It's wonderful to be up here with all these super guests. If you're like me and you grew up in a certain era, the best thing about coming home from school every day was you knew the Adventures of Superman was on once you got home. A lot of us grew up watching that show, loving that show. There were only about 103 or 104 episodes. We knew them by heart, but every day we came home and watched them. It's my honor to be here today on behalf of Comic-Con International to present to the real Jimmy Olsen, Mr. Jack Larson, our Inkpot Award.
My brother Gary. Well, let's go back to you, Jack. As the elder statesman on the staff, what would you say is different between Superman then and Superman now? How is the guttural reaction from the audience?
Well, I've been there since 1951, when we did the first Adventures of Superman, and my pal, or I was his pal, George Reeves, who was a terrific Superman, and Mr. Cavell is a terrific Superman. And it's been my observation through the years that Warner Brothers has been very fortunate in all of their Supermen. Brandon, Dean Cain, everyone. So I've always been amazed. It's a magic part, and I'm been very, very proud to be a part of it since 1951.
Try the other one to your left.
No, I'll just say, look, it's an honor to be part of something that's really a fabric of Americana. If you look at Superman, he really has changed over the 7.5 decades. He's really reflected the culture that he is doing his stories in, I guess. And so if you look at the 30s, late 30s, he was a social crusader. In the 40s, he fought the fascists and the Nazis. In the 60s, all these different forms of colored kryptonite were created, and if you ate different colored kryptonite, it gave you weird powers, and you had weird experiences. And then in the 80s, he became more yuppified. In the 90s, he had a mullet. And today, well, no, I love the mullet. I mean it derogatorily. And then, obviously, today, you know, it's a character that is very intense. And you know, it's amazing to see the CGI and all the technology being able to finally capture the insane powers of Superman so extraordinarily well on the big screen.
I'm curious, Molly and Dylan, the youngest members of the panel, what does Superman mean to your generation?
I think Superman's been around for a very long time, and it really means a lot to me that he's been able to be such a role model for people of all ages, of all cultures, of all races, all over the world. That's something that I really think is epic and what makes him, you know, what's kept him around so long. And hopefully for very much more of a long time. For another 75 years, and then another 75 years, and so on.
I think that, this is on, right? Yes, hello. Superman always makes the best of his situation. He always does what's right, which I think is great for people in our generation to see, because standing up for yourself and standing up for others is something that is very difficult to do, and it seems that, you know, seems to be kind of lacking nowadays. Superman is a wonderful example to everyone, and he's completely impacted my life, and, you know, especially Supergirl as well. I can't help it. She's amazing. And their partnership is wonderful, and yeah, I love Superman. He's great. He's the best. He's the best, and I'm so glad that he will continue to influence other generations.
For our esteemed comic folk on the panel, Jim, Paul, and Dan, and Grant, if you had to recommend 1 or 2 Superman stories to a complete novice, nobody that had ever read a Superman book, what would it be?
It kind of depends on the generation. I think the magic of what Jerry and Joe originally created is that it gets reborn in each of our work in its time. And I think if I were recommending to a novice today, I'd probably recommend Scott and Jim's work on Superman Unchained. It's a wonderful story. It's not necessarily better than the stories of my childhood when Superman was being done by Mort Weisinger and his team, but it's of this moment and this style. And that's what's great, that we've each been able to step in and transform it and change it and make it of our moment, and that you guys are possessing Superman with the magic of your time.
I think, and I'm terrible with issue numbers and things like that, but Alan Moore wrote a very beautiful story about Superman and the dreams he could have had if he had been able to stay on Krypton. Help me out with the issue number. Yes, I believe so. Thank you, Paul. The annual number 9. And the beauty of that story is it really captures the idea of self-sacrifice with Superman and the idea of nobility and what he gave up and continued to give up to be Superman for all of us.
I guess I'd choose a weird one, which is Superman Muhammad Ali from 1978. What I loved about that book was it was actually Superman with a guy that we recognised from The Ring, from on television, and the two of them were duking it out with aliens. And it was so beautifully drawn by Neil Adams. It's a kind of preposterous story, but it's also Superman at his best, and Superman learning to box from the greatest. And I just love that book.
I'm actually going to recommend Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman for those of you. For those of you who've never read a Superman comic or a comic book, that is the volume to get. Grant is a unique kind of writer in that he actually goes back and rereads all the issues. So what, 75 times 12, what is that, quickly? 828? No, I don't know. Anyway, so he went back and he synthesizes everything so that, because there are a lot of weird Superman stories, especially in the 50s and 60s, and a lot of people reject that kind of stuff. And what Grant does so well is he takes all that, incorporates it, and modernizes it so that you don't feel guilty for appreciating the past, and gives you a story that feels very, very contemporary. I would highly recommend that book. It's awesome.
Thanks, Tim.
I would look. I love all the Superman work that you guys have done, but we actually quoted some of All-Star Superman in the new Man of Steel, so it was a direct homage to that.
All right, conversely, to the actors. When you took the role, and when you even considered taking the role, did the responsibility of the role dawn on you at that point? What was that like? Jack, Molly, Dylan.
Okay, I'll take this one. Yes, the responsibility, I was fully aware of the responsibility, but when it came to it affecting me, I tried to push it to the back of my mind because it's so important to everyone, or certainly to a lot of people. And if I were to allow that kind of pressure and that responsibility to affect me, I don't think I would have done the role justice. And so I just tried to focus myself on the task at hand, which is representing the character properly, as opposed to fulfilling the hopes and dreams of so many people out there, which is a pretty daunting task. And even now, I still put that to the back of my mind.
I had a very different experience because when I started doing the voice of Superman, I thought I was doing a cartoon for a bunch of kids, and I didn't realize that all of you people were out there. And yet here you are. I was just talking to Henry about this backstage, and it took me a while to realize that I was representing someone who was protecting truth, justice, and the American way. So I now realize the gravitas that it has, and tend to take it a lot more seriously. The other thing I want to say about Superman is that he's such an enormous personality, such a huge character, that so many actors have been able to embody him, and he can handle it all. You know, including our first British Superman, I believe. Correct?
That I'm aware of.
He doesn't even have to be from America anymore. Yeah, apparently our other superheroes don't either. Batman, Spider-Man, they're both English too, right? Anyway, the next James Bond is sitting right here. I also want to say that, you know, I've been doing the voice of Superman for 20 years, and my son Sam just did the voice of Superman in the new Flashpoint movie that premiered last night. I think it was the first father-son Superman. So we're an embodiment of the generational aspect of how Superman is passed down.
I think for me, I saw the responsibility that I was taking, you know, because a lot of, in the scenes that I did, had some heart, which built up to Henry's, the rest of the movie, what he carried on throughout the movie. So I realized that, but for me, it was more about the fact that I was representing kids everywhere who have a struggle with being different. Every kid at that age really feels like that, or at least most kids. So I really feel like that was what I was representing, along with Superman, the movie, but I think that I wanted people to be able to relate to the character, and that's really what we all kind of worked on.
Oh, Supergirl. Well, you know, I have to say, not only, I mean, poor thing, to wake up and all of a sudden see, you know, her little cousin grown into this man that no longer listens to her. I mean, that's completely infuriating. And it's a lot like me, even though I am, you know, 19, I didn't, you know, not aged for 20 years because I was on a spaceship that landed, you know, on Earth. But I've always felt so much older than my older brothers and always try to take that control, even though I don't have superpowers, even though I would like to. So for me, that, you know, that power struggle, that trying to find my way and not wanting anyone's help, I unfortunately really relate with that. And that was fun to bring to her. She's such a complex character. And I had so many great examples before me. There's so many other wonderful actresses that had done her voice. And of course, I would love to see her live action as well. But yeah, I did some Supergirl and Ha'el action. I think that'd be pretty cool from issue 52. So yes, I love her complexity. And every day I discover more and more about her. Even when I'm not voicing her, I'm thinking about her. She's a character that really sticks with you. And I love her. That's that.
There was, our first producer was Bob Maxwell, who produced a radio show. And Jimmy had been a creation on radio, but he was not a comic book character. And I wasn't familiar. I was very familiar with Superman because as a little kid, I collected the Superman. I had the first Superman comic book. My mother gave it to the Salvation Army later. But I had all of them. They came in at the drugstore where I used to hang out as a boy. And so I'd been under contract to Warner Brothers. I'd done a couple of big films for them, one with the great director, Raoul Walsh, a film called Fighter Squadron. And then the studios ran into a bad time in 1951 when they had to sell the theaters. And suddenly there was going to be television, but there had been no film television. There was live television, and Lucy was filming with 3 cameras and became very popular. And so somehow Jack Leibowitz, your boss at one time at DC, they decided to make a series, 26 shows of the Adventures of Superman. And I was cast as Jimmy Olsen. I had nothing to go on, and not the comic books, not anything. But the great thing I had to go on was that everybody was out of work. And there were great character actors. Elijah Cook Jr. from The Maltese Falcon, just endless terrific people who came in to work on Superman as villains or friends or whatever. And so the joy of being a young actor and learning to act, which I had not learned, though I'd done 2 major films, Warner Brothers, to learn from these wonderful people and try to do this one-camera show, which was the first one-camera show ever done, with wonderful people like George Reeves, who was my Superman Phyllis coach, Noel Neill, my wonderful John Hamilton, who was my Perry White, and to work with all these great character actors. And they let me have my sway with comedy. And so I was able to turn Jimmy into a rather comic character from being a juvenile under duress by villains. And so it just developed, and I had no responsibility, but later I had a responsibility because Jimmy became very popular, and as Paul will know, they then put out a comic book. They put Superman pal Jimmy Olsen, and everybody loved Jimmy, and so I had a responsibility then, but not in the beginning. It just was a blessing to do the part, though I didn't know it at the time.
All right, we take a couple of questions from social media, off of Facebook. What, you don't have a Facebook page?
I don't.
Have you friended him yet?
It's not me.
Not Henry Cavill. I like it. All right, this is for Henry, actually. What did you take away from past Superman roles and incorporate into Man of Steel?
Well, when it came to me creating this character for me personally, and with the groundwork and framework that my friend David here had laid down, I wanted to avoid watching previous live action stuff, purely because that was, in my opinion, someone else's interpretation of the character in the comic books. And I wanted this to be our interpretation of the character without anyone else's influence affecting that, and therefore muddying the line between source material and live action. So I didn't use any influence from previous performances.